Hello, Dr. Cisse covering anatomy and physiology. Today we'll talk about the autonomic nervous system. Let's present the nervous system in general. You see here the whole nervous system. The blue is the central nervous system with the brain and spinal cord. The yellow is the peripheral nervous system made out of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. So the central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, divided into the sensory division and the motor division. Sensory receives information, motor gives the command. Sensory division, depending on where it's coming from, if it's coming from visceral, like internal organ, it's going to be the visceral sensory division, such as coming from your heart, from your lung, from the kidney. Somatic sensory division means it's coming from your muscles or your joints, like on your skin. So these kind of information will be processed in the brain, right? And then command has to be given. That command is given through the motor division. And if the information is going to a somatic muscle, right, like a skeletal muscle here, it's called somatic motor division. We talked about this in another video. But today, we wanted to present the visceral motor division. When the central nervous system makes the decision to talk to visceral organ, like a motor effector, that's what we're talking about today. So the visceral motor division is called also autonomic nervous system because it's done for you automatically. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about your heartbeat or your kidney or your stomach making stuff. You don't think about it. It's done for you automatically. The part of the nervous system that controls that is called the autonomic nervous system. It's divided into two parts, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions, which controls your viscera, your internal organs, such as your heart, your liver, stomach, or your lungs. So the autonomic nervous system is independent of our will. We do not make a decision about it. It is done for us automatically. We don't control our heart rate, our blood pressure, or body temperature. What are the primary organs of the autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system works on what? Glands, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle, like your blood vessel, stomach, and stuff like that. So it's called visceral motor system. Why? Because it's making the viscera do something. It's done for you automatically. That's why it's called autonomic nervous system. So some structure of the body wall, for example, the cutaneous blood vessel, the blood vessel in the skin. If you cold or hot, your blood vessel will dilate or it will shrink depending on if it's hot, it will dilate to release the heat. That's done for you, right? If it's cold, it will constrict to preserve the heat. That is done for you. Sweat gland. If your run is too hot, you sweat to cool you off, right? If you're cold, you don't sweat. Or piloerector muscle. You have goosebumps, for example. You shiver when you're cold. All those are done automatically. It is involuntary. The visceral field do not depend on the autonomic nervous system. Now, even though the autonomic nervous system control those automatically, those organs do not depend on the autonomic nervous system. They're just balanced, controlled by it. So if you, for example, you cut the autonomic nervous system from an organ, it will not stop it from working. It will just kind of make the organ do it not in the right way. It will not be balanced, right? It will kind of do more or less depending on what you cut off. Now, let's talk about visceral reflexes. We talked about somatic reflex before, when you have something on your muscle that makes you do something. For example, your knee patella reflex. If somebody hit your patella, you kind of move your leg, you extend your knee. Now, the visceral reflex will be a visceral organ. It will have a receptor, a control center, right? And then effector, just like a somatic reflex. The difference is going to be, it's going to come from a viscera. It's going to come from something that we don't control. So it's going to go to the central nervous system. The interneuron in the central nervous system will process the information, giving the command that will be carried out by a visceral organ. So it's considered as efferent pathway. This is an example of autonomic reflex arc. You have baroreceptors on the heart that will sense blood vessel dilation or constriction, so blood pressure level, that will go to the brainstem. The brainstem, which is in the central nervous system, the interneuron here will process the information, give the command to balance the heart rate. So this is going to be like a typical reflex, visceral reflex arc. Now, the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is what we call fight or flight. It is done in a situation where we have to get away from a danger, like a state of arousal, a state of doing something. But in the parasympathetic nervous system, it is when we have to relax, rest, and digest. That makes your body slow down, calm, relaxing. So the two have to work together. Just like when you have an accelerator as a sympathetic and the brake as parasympathetic to balance things off in your body. Now, the autonomic nervous system is not a separate system. It's inside the central nervous system and inside the peripheral nervous system. It is controlled by nuclei in the hypothalamus, which is part of the brainstem. And it has a motor neuron in the spinal cord, right? And then it goes through the cranial and the spinal nerves, just like those nerves that we use for peripheral nervous system. So what's the difference between somatic and autonomic pathway? In somatic pathway, we have a neuron talking to a muscle. What type of muscle? Skeletal muscle. In autonomic nervous system, we're going to have preganglionic and postganglionic. Let's look at the picture here. The somatic nervous system, for example, in the somatic pathway, we have a sensory neuron receiving information, process here in the spinal cord, or going to the brain, depending on the situation. Command is given back to the muscle. You see how it goes directly to the muscle? But if it's a autonomic nervous system, if it's sympathetic, then the motor will go to a ganglia and then to synapse to another neuron with another neuron, which will go to the target organ. Now you see how it's here the neuron before the ganglia is called the preganglionic fiber, and then the one after is on the postganglionic. Here the preganglionic is short and postganglionic long. But if you go to the parasympathetic nervous system, you see that the motor neuron goes all the way to the ganglia, long preganglionic and very short postganglionic. So short preganglionic, long postganglionic for the sympathetic nervous system. It's also called thoracolumbar. Why? Because all the division of the sympathetic is located in the thoracolumbar. Preganglionic short, postganglionic long. And you see all the target organs or all the visual organs. The postganglionic neuron or fiber, where does it go? After entering the sympathetic chain, the postganglionic fiber can follow different direction. Look at this here. If you take the motor neuron, it can come synapse to another neuron and go to the target, like for example, sweat gland and skeletal muscle and other organs here. But if you have, for example, the motor neuron going to the ganglia, passing through and come all the way to the collateral ganglia to liver. So it means that in skeletal muscle, we go from the ventral root here, giving the command to the somatic skeletal muscle, but in the autonomic nervous system, you stop at the ganglia, you go up and down, so you have more stop before you get to target organ. Here, for example, you see all the ganglia here on the side. These nerve fiber will synapse in the ganglia and go to target organ depending on the organ. And the adrenal gland is like a ganglia if you look at it. It has almost everything that ganglia has. What about the parasympathetic division, also called craniosacral? Why is it called craniosacral? Because it is located in the cranial and sacral area. In the cranial, it is in the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla, which is what the brainstem. And the sacral region will be the S2 to S4. The difference, it has a long preganglionic and short postganglionic. So the parasympathetic division is selective, more selective, right? So it's kind of pick specific organs you need to excite. So there is only a little neural divergence, less than divergence exhibited by sympathetic nervous system. Let's look at the parasympathetic. What nerve will be used in the parasympathetic? The oculomotor nerve. Now, when the pupil of your eye gets small and big, you don't control that. So the muscles that are controlled by this oculomotor nerve are not voluntary. So the oculomotor nerve. What about the facial nerve that control your tear, nasal discharge, and salivatory gland? We don't control those. Those are autonomic nervous system. They're controlled by the facial nerve. What about the glossopharyngeal nerve number 9, the parotid salivatory gland? All those are parasympathetic, right? Because you have to relax to secrete, the tear, the glands, this kind of relaxing thing. Or the vagus nerve, as far as proximal half of column. So the vagus nerve will go all to the column, cardiac, pulmonary, esophagus, and then it goes to posterior vagal trunk, right? So to tell you that the parasympathetic nervous system is use specific cranial nerves to go to specific organ. That's why we say it's very selective. Look at it here. The long preganglionic and the short postganglionic. So we have the ganglia almost in the target organ, sometimes right next to it. So long pre and short post. Yeah, you see here, for example, we have the cranial sacral, because in the nerve that will come from the cranial area is one that will be innervating these organs. The enteric nervous system is like a nervous system of the digestive tract. So just to tell you that we have a nervous system that controls our digestion. Why are we talking about neurotransmitter? Just like we talk about neurotransmitter in the skeletal muscle, in the somatic nervous system, we say the neurons secrete neurotransmitter that will be released on this target neuron, the next neuron or the target organ, for them to conduct their different activity. So we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic fiber that secrete different neurotransmitter, norepinephrine and acetylcholine. So the receptors on target cell vary. It depends on what type of receptor. We have, for example, acetylcholine that is secreted by all preganglionic neuron in both division of the nervous system, of the autonomic nervous system, and by postganglionic parasympathetic neuron, postganglionic only. So axon that secrete ACH, acetylcholine, are called cholinergic fiber. Any receptor that binds to acetylcholine is called cholinergic receptor. We got muscarinic and nicotinic receptor, just different type of receptors in target organ that receive acetylcholine. So to conclude, let's talk about the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. It is the visceral motor division divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now let's compare the sympathetic and parasympathetic now. In the sympathetic on the left, you see a short preganglionic, a long postganglionic. It is located in the thoracic and lumbar region in the middle. In the parasympathetic, it is located in the cranial and sacral region. It has a very long preganglionic, a very short postganglionic. Sometimes the ganglia is even in the target organ. So maybe there's no length there. So this video is for you to understand the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic, because it's done for you. It's done for you, you don't have to control it. All these organs you see are controlled by your hypothalamus, which is the control center of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is an efferent, exiting, is a motor division of the visceral nervous system, of the visceral system, right? So we need to understand the big idea. The nervous system is divided into the central nervous and peripheral nervous system. The brain, spinal cord, all the peripheral. Now, when the target organ is a viscera, is an internal organ, it's called autonomic nervous system. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in class.